Julian Vance had $30 million of pure gold bullion stacked inside his reinforced subterranean vault, but at 3 in the morning, he could not buy a single dry match to keep his fingers from turning black. The temperature inside his locked granite manor had fallen to 20 below zero. The heaviest gold bar in the safe felt colder than a dead man's jaw, sucking the remaining life from his trembling palms, while the Arctic wind screamed through the frozen spruce trees outside his barred study windows. The North Atlantic gale had begun 5 days earlier as a thin, mournful whistle through the spruce trees above Black Harbor. Julian stood at the third-floor bay window of his cliffside manor, looking down at the frozen docks where 40 fishing trawlers lay trapped in harbor ice. In his right hand, he turned the 1-kilogram bar of cast gold, number 774, letting the sharp machined edges bite into his palm. It was his cold anchor, the talisman that reminded him he had conquered the hunger that killed his father on a damp cellar pallet 40 years ago. By noon, the telegraph in his study chattered with emergency warnings. An unprecedented polar vortex was colliding with a coastal storm, bringing 60-mile-an-hour winds and towering snowdrifts. Silas Thorne, his junior broker, arrived stamping snow from his boots. The village council wants our emergency salt and grain reserves released before dark, Silas said. The fishermen are entirely out of coal. Julian did not turn from the window. What is the market rate on road salt in Portland today? $40 a ton, Silas replied with a thin smile. Yesterday, it was 15. Then our price at Black Harbor is 60, Julian said, his voice flat as slate. They pay in gold coin or signed timber deeds. No charity. Those who fail to prepare must pay the penalty. A knock sounded on the heavy oak door. Clara entered without waiting, snow dusting her blue clinic coat. The clinic lost its oil burner 2 hours ago, Father, Clara said, stepping forward. Father Thomas opened the chapel basement for 80 freezing families, but we have no dry fuel. Your warehouses hold enough split birch to keep the county warm through February. Julian set the gold bar down on his ledger. Those warehouses are private property. A merchant who trades on sentiment ends up on a straw pallet. You are an old man sitting on a mountain of salt while children freeze, Clara whispered. Leave, Clara, Julian replied coldly. Clara placed a dented tin mug wrapped in navy yarn on his desk. Mother knitted this for you when I was 7, she whispered. She thought you were just cold on the outside. I see now the ice reached your heart long ago. She walked out into the gathering storm. By 4 in the afternoon, the sky turned the color of bruised iron. The storm struck Black Harbor not with a gradual snowfall, but with an explosive wall of white fury that tore roof shingles from the harbor boatworks in the first 20 minutes. The gale shrieked against the cliff-top manor like a living beast, hurling ice pellets against the multi-pane bay windows until the thick plate glass began to shudder and spiderweb under the immense pressure. Julian stood by the hearth in his cavernous study, listening to the 3-story house groan against its granite foundations. The cast-iron radiator pipes along the wainscoting clanked once, shuddered violently with trapped steam, and then fell utterly silent. Down in the utility basement, the electric circuit breaker box erupted in a shower of brilliant blue sparks as the main high-voltage transmission line across the coastal bridge collapsed into the churning surf. Darkness fell instantly over the entire estate, thick, sudden, and suffocating. Julian pulled a heavy brass oil lantern from the wall bracket and lit the braided wick with steady fingers. The yellow flame cast long, trembling shadows across the ceiling moldings, the leather-bound shipping volumes, and the heavy mahogany furniture. He walked down the back stone stairs to the mechanical room, his breath already plumes of white vapor in the stairwell, to start the commercial diesel generator that powered the manor's independent heating grid. He turned the heavy brass ignition key. The diesel motor turned over twice with a sluggish, grinding metallic groan, sputtered once, and died. Julian primed the secondary fuel pump and cranked the ignition again. Nothing happened, except the dry, hollow clicking of a frozen solenoid. He unbolted the fuel filter housing and found the heavy diesel fuel turned into a milky, waxy slush. The extreme sub-zero draft, howling through the foundation vents, had gelled the petroleum inside the copper intake lines. "Useless machinery," Julian muttered, through clenched teeth, slamming the iron inspection door shut. He climbed back to the second floor. The temperature inside the grand central hallway was dropping with terrifying speed, losing 5 degrees every quarter hour as the 60-mile-an-hour wind sucked every trace of warmth through the stone mortar. He returned to the grand study and attempted to light the great walk-in stone fireplace. He crumpled old shipping manifests, stacked dry birch kindling, and struck a sulfur match. The paper flared into orange flame, but instead of drawing upward into the chimney, a ferocious downdraft of sub-zero Arctic air slammed down the flue, driving blinding black soot and suffocating smoke back into the room. The exterior chimney cap on the roof had frozen solid under a 4-foot dome of glaze ice, sealing the masonry air column completely. Coughing violently, his eyes burning with acrid ash and tears, Julian was forced to smother the fledgling fire with a heavy wool hearthrug before the smoke choked him. The cold was no longer an abstract condition of the coastal winter. It was an active invading force, creeping relentlessly across the floorboards. The antique Persian rugs stiffened like cardboard under his leather boots. The water in the cut crystal decanter on the sideboard froze solid, cracking the heavy crystal with a sharp report, like a pistol shot in the silent room. Julian retreated to his master bedchamber, pulling 3 thick down comforters over his heavy wool overcoat. He lay in the center of the carved 4-poster bed, shivering in the pitch black, listening to the massive oak ceiling beams above him creak and strain under the weight of the accumulating snowdrifts. But the down blankets offered no lasting warmth because his own body, shivering uncontrollably and exhausted from the chill, was no longer producing enough thermal energy to heat the dead air trapped beneath the quilts. The cold seeped through the horsehair mattress like damp iron. His breath formed thick frost on the wool blankets right before his nose. Every inhalation pulled needles of frost into his bronchial passages, making his chest ache with a dull, hollow throb. He could hear the outside thermometer at the corner of the cedar eaves, tapping against the siding in the wind. Its red mercury column collapsed entirely into the reservoir below, -30. Outside, the ocean roared against the granite cliffs, throwing spray that froze before it hit the ground. The entire world was turning to stone and ice. The frost crept across the polished floorboards like white ferns, locking the bedroom door firmly in its jamb. He wrapped his shearling collar tight around his throat, listening to the shrieking wind strip the guttering from the roof above. He knew that if he remained in this bed until morning, he would simply drift into the final sleep, frozen beneath feathers and linen like an abandoned traveler in the high mountains. Every clock in the house had stopped, their brass pendulums frozen in the thickened lubricating oil. The silence between gusts of wind was vast and terrifying. He looked at his hands in the dark, unable to feel the ring on his finger. By midnight, the realization struck him like a physical blow to the chest. The monolithic granite mansion he had spent 20 years constructing to insulate himself from the world was functioning as a colossal stone refrigerator. The thick granite blocks, having lost their central steam heat, were absorbing the sub-zero exterior temperatures and radiating that killing chill inward with lethal efficiency. He remembered the subterranean vault beneath the foundation cellar. The vault had reinforced 3-foot concrete walls, insulated double steel doors, and sat 6 feet below the coastal frost line. There, stacked in sealed wooden crates, were rows of survival rations, vintage spirits, and his $30 million in solid gold bullion. Julian gathered the brass lantern, his heavy shearling coat, and the heavy master keyring, and began the slow, stumbling descent down the icy basement stairs. The cellar air was so bitterly cold that each breath stung his throat like swallowed crushed glass. His leather boots slipped on the frost-coated concrete floor. He reached the massive circular vault hatch, spun the brass combination dial with stiffened fingers, entered the code, and hauled the 3-ton steel door open on its oiled roller bearings. He stepped inside the vault and pulled the heavy hatch shut behind him, turning the interior locking wheel to seal out the roaring gale of the upper floors. The silence inside the subterranean vault was absolute, heavy, and dense as lead. Julian hung the brass lantern from an iron ceiling hook and surveyed his underground sanctuary. Rows of polished cedar crates held tins of Scottish biscuits, smoked ham, dried fruit, imported tea, and vacuum-sealed survival rations. Along the reinforced north wall, heavy steel racks held 800 bars of pure cast gold bullion, each reflecting a dull, indifferent luster beneath the single flickering flame. He sat on a wooden packing crate, pulling his shearling collar tightly around his freezing ears. Within 30 minutes, the terrifying physical reality of the vault revealed itself. The reinforced concrete walls and heavy steel armor plate were not trapping warmth. They were conducting the deep subterranean frost directly into the sealed enclosure. Because the underground room had no air circulation, the dense cold settled onto the floor like invisible water, rising inch by inch. The vapor from Julian's shallow breathing condensed onto the steel racks as a delicate, white rime of razor-sharp ice crystals. He tried to open a tin of cured meat with his steel pocket knife, but his fingers shook so violently that the blade slipped, gouging across his thumb. He felt no sharp pain, only a dull, distant pressure. The drop of blood that welled from the cut froze into a hard crimson bead on his skin before it could roll down his hand. Julian stood up, desperate to keep moving, desperate to generate some spark of internal heat. He paced the narrow aisle between the steel racks, slapping his arms against his chest. His breath puffed in rapid, shallow bursts, crystallizing on the collar of his coat like powdered sugar. He reached for a bottle of vintage French cognac from the upper shelf. The high-proof spirit had turned into a thick, syrupy gel that clung to the dark glass. When he pressed the bottle opening to his lips, the frozen glass instantly tore a strip of skin from his lower lip, filling his mouth with the salty copper taste of his own frozen blood. Panic seized him, savage and primal. He looked at the towering steel racks of gold bullion. $30 million, enough to buy every ship, every wharf, every acre of land in Black Harbor 3 times over. He pulled bar number 774 from the steel rack. He clutched it against his chest with both arms, desperately trying to draw some sense of security from its immense mass. The gold bar was 80 degrees below zero. It pulled the residual thermal heat from his wool coat, his flannel shirt, and his sternum like an industrial heat sink, chilling his heart to the core. With a ragged cry of fury, Julian hurled the gold bar across the vault. It struck the concrete floor with a dead, ringing clang, skidding across the white frost without leaving the slightest scratch on the stone. "Take it!" Julian screamed into the empty darkness, his voice cracking into a broken, breathless sob. "Take the gold. Take the warehouses. Take every title deed. Give me 1 hour of fire." The silent vault answered, with nothing but the low hiss of the dying lantern wick. The kerosene was thickening in the brass font, turning cloudy and viscous. The yellow flame shrank to a tiny pale blue bead, casting the rows of gold bars in long skeletal shadows that seemed to lean toward him from the darkness. Julian slumped against the concrete wall, his knees giving way beneath his weight. His toes and fingers had turned a waxy, translucent white, entirely devoid of sensation. The violent shivering stopped, replaced by a terrifying, heavy drowsiness that pulled his eyelids down like lead weights. His core temperature was collapsing toward the final threshold. He felt the cold creeping up his spine like liquid lead, turning his joints to rigid stone. There was no pain left, only a profound, hollow stillness that swallowed every thought. In the dim blue twilight of the fading wick, his memory drifted back 40 years to the tenement cellar where his father had died. He remembered his father's blue, rigid fingers clutching the unpaid coal receipts, and he understood, with devastating, absolute clarity, that he had spent his entire adult life running away from that frozen cellar, only to construct a far colder tomb with his own hands. His father had died lacking gold. Julian was dying buried beneath it. He thought of Clara standing in his study with that worn tin mug. He thought of her warm amber eyes, of the 80 families huddled together in Father Thomas's chapel basement, keeping each other alive with the shared warmth of their breath and their soup. Julian looked down at his ruined, frostbitten hands lying useless on his lap. A single warm tear slipped from the corner of his eye and froze instantly into an ice bead against the grey stubble of his cheek. "Clara," he whispered into the freezing tomb, his voice barely a breath. "Forgive me, I was the poorest man in this town." His chin fell against his chest as the lantern flame sputtered once, curled into a wisp of grey smoke, and died, plunging the vault into absolute, icy blackness. A heavy vibration shuddered through the concrete floor beneath Julian's frozen body. It was the deep diesel roar of a harbour tractor, fitted with a snowplow, churning through the drifts that blocked the carriage road. Above him, the heavy oak doors of the estate splintered open. Boots stamped down the cellar stairs, accompanied by halogen searchlights cutting through the frozen dark. "Down here," a rough voice shouted. "The vault wheel is jammed with ice." An iron crowbar slammed into the steel hatch with a screech of metal. The 3-ton vault door swung open on its hinges, letting in yellow searchlights and a rush of air smelling of cedar wood smoke and damp wool. Clara dropped to her knees on the frost beside her father. Behind her stood Father Thomas and 2 fishermen carrying wool blankets, hot salt bricks, and an insulated thermos. "Father," Clara cried, grasping his icy shoulders. "He's breathing. Wrap him in the heated blankets. Bring the broth now." Julian opened his heavy eyelids. In the lantern glare, he saw his daughter's face streaked with soot and melting snow, her eyes shining with love. She stripped off her mittens, placed her bare, warm hands over his frozen cheeks, and blew her hot breath directly against his eyes to melt the frost on his lashes. The touch of her warm skin against his frost-bitten flesh was a searing burn that brought tears to his eyes, but it was the first real warmth he had felt in 30 years. Father Thomas poured a spoonful of steaming cinnamon barley broth past his cracked lips, dissolving the tight iron band around his chest. Julian looked up at Clara, his trembling fingers reaching out to touch the navy wool sleeve of the tin mug in her coat pocket. "The master keys," Julian croaked, pulling the brass ring from his coat and pressing them into Clara's warm hand. "The 3 warehouses on the wharf, the birch, the coal, the grain. Open every door, Clara. Take the trucks. Give everything away to the harbour. Keep everyone warm." Clara looked at the keys, then into her father's eyes, seeing a man stripped bare, broken, and finally alive. She pulled his head gently against her shoulder, wrapping the wool blanket around him. "We will, Father," she whispered into his hair. "We'll keep everyone warm." 2 mornings later, the historic blizzard broke, leaving Black Harbor beneath a vast sky of pristine sapphire blue. Down at the harbor boatworks, the 3-barrel stoves glowed a deep cherry red, radiating dry pine heat that filled the wooden loft. Nearly 200 townspeople sat along the cedar work tables, sharing hot porridge and drying their wool coats beside the hearths. Outside the open double doors, 3 flatbed trucks from Vance Commodities stood in the snow, their cargo beds empty after delivering 40 tons of coal and 500 cords of birch to every cottage along the coast. Julian sat in a wooden rocking chair 3 feet from the largest stove, his shoulders wrapped in a thick patchwork quilt. His bandaged fingers were stiff and healing, but the healthy color of life had returned to his face. On the rough pine windowsill beside his chair, the gold bar number 774 lay half buried under wood shavings and ash, functioning as a simple doorstop to keep the drafty side door from swinging shut in the breeze. No one looked at it. No one cared what it was worth. Clara walked over from the steaming soup kettles and placed the dented tin mug into his hands. The knitted navy sleeve was soft and warm, and the fragrant steam of hot cinnamon tea curled upward into the golden sunlight. Julian wrapped both bandaged hands around the cup and closed his eyes, drawing the heat deep into his chest. The tea was hot, and for the first time in 30 years, his hands were warm.